The city stretched endlessly beyond the glass walls of Thomas's office, steel and light shimmering in the morning haze. He stood motionless, hands in his pockets, the weight of the skyline pressing against his thoughts. His phone buzzed. The name on the screen froze him in place. Olivia. For a long second, he considered letting it ring out. But curiosity, or maybe stubborn, different. He answered. Thomas. Her voice slid through the line, smooth and self-assured, still too busy saving the world one investment at a time. What do you want, Olivia? He asked, his voice low, controlled. I just thought you'd like to know. I'm getting engaged. The sweetness in her tone was so sharp, it cut. To someone who actually knows how to commit. We're throwing a little celebration. You are, of course, invited. He said nothing. She chuckled lightly. Come on, Thomas. It's been 3 years since we broke up, and you still haven't managed to find anyone new. Or is it that you're so impossible no woman can stand you past a coffee date? His jaw tightened. That's none of your business. Oh, but it is. Her voice dipped into a purr. I might have told everyone you'd show up alone. It is your pattern, after all. Cold, proud, incapable of real connection. Silence hung between them. Unless, she added sweetly, you surprise us all and bring someone, that is, if you can find anyone willing to pretend they love you for a night. Thomas's gaze shifted to the skyline, eyes narrowing. You'll be surprised, he said quietly. Good, she replied, satisfaction dripping from her voice. I like surprises. The call ended, but the sting stayed. The next morning, Thomas walked through Central Park, the weight of the conversation still clinging to him. He needed air, clarity, something to still the storm in his mind. That was when he heard it. Not just a melody, but a voice, raw, emotional, steady, like rain against an old roof. He followed the sound through winding paths until he found her standing, beneath a weathered lamppost, guitar slung low, her dark hair loose and unrestrained. A faded denim jacket hung over her shoulders, her boots scuffed from streets that never gave. An open guitar case sat at her feet, scattered with a few crumpled bills. Her voice. It felt like it could soften stone. Thomas waited until the last note faded into the air. She looked up, eyes meeting his with guarded curiosity. You have a voice, he said. I have a name too, she replied, wary but steady. Lana, he nodded once. Thomas. Her gaze swept over him. Let me guess, finance, corporate, something expansive. Close enough, he said. Then without much pause, I have a proposal for you. Her eyebrow arched. I don't do anything illegal. Not illegal, he said calmly. Just unusual. I need a date. One evening, a party, she asked, half amused. Yes, my ex's engagement party. She expects me to show up alone. Lana folded her arms, studying him. And you want me to play Cinderella? You'd be paid, he replied, his tone even, generously, enough to help you out. She stepped into his apartment, her gaze drifting over every immaculate surface. The place was sleek, modern, and almost two perfect floor-to-ceiling windows spilling the city's glittering lights across. Soft grey furniture, a kitchen that looked like it belonged on the cover of a design magazine. She rested her hand on the cool marble countertop, arching a brow. You sure you actually cook in here? Thomas shrugged out of his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing strong forearms marked with faint old scars. Used to cook every night when my mum was sick. It stuck. Lana opened a drawer and froze. You alphabetized your spices. Efficiency, he replied with a faint smirk. She snorted. You're either a control freak or a serial killer. While he chopped onions with precise, almost military skill, Lana tried to imitate him. Her knife slipped, sending slices skittering across the counter. She yelped and stepped back. Okay, I'm officially banned from all sharp objects. Thomas chuckled low, stepping in behind her, his hands briefly guiding hers. Firm grip, curl your fingers. You'll keep them that way. She caught herself, holding her breath before pulling back. Noted. The scent of onions and fresh herbs soon filled the air. She sneezed, blinking through the sting. How do you do this without crying? Experience, he said without looking up, and emotional repression. She knocked over the salt jar, groaning as white grains scattered. Thomas simply grabbed a towel and helped clean it up. No irritation in his voice. You don't get mad easily, do you? She asked. I've learned not to, he said, almost absent lie. By the time pasta simmered on the stove and sauce sizzled in the pan, they had settled into a quiet, natural rhythm. Over dinner, Thomas refilled her glass. So our story. Olivia will ask what you do. I'll tell her I'm a singer. Bars, sidewalks, and maybe birthday parties for dogs, she said with a smirk. Say you sing to live, he corrected softly, not to impress. She tilted her head. You like correcting people, don't you? I like clarity. For a moment, their eyes held. Lana raised her glass. A toast. To what? To poverty. The only reason we're drinking water. He allowed the faintest smile. To low expectations. And, she added more quietly, the thrill of pretending. His gaze didn't waver. This doesn't feel like pretending. She looked away first. Not yet, anyway. The chandelier above the grand ballroom glowed like a cascade of molten gold, scattering light over crystal glasses and silk gowns. Waiters moved with quiet precision, weaving between clusters of whispered conversations. The air rich with the scent of champagne and polished ambition. Thomas stepped through the entrance first. Every inch, the composed CEO, jaw set, gaze steady, the faintest trace of cool detachment in his stride. But the moment Lana appeared at his side, the energy in the room shifted. It was subtle at first and almost imperceptible. Lull in the music of murmured voices, but then it spread. Heads began to turn. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. A champagne. Flute paused halfway to painted lips. She wore the forest green gown like it had been made for her, and her alonit's fabric clinging and flowing in perfect balance, catching the light as if the gown itself breathed with her. Her hair was swept into an elegant twist, yet a few rebellious curls framed her face, softening her expression. No diamonds, no sequins, just the worn leather bracelet circling her wrist like a secret she wasn't willing to trade for glamour. She didn't walk into the ballroom as though she owned it. She walked as though she belonged without needing to prove it. Thomas offered his arm, and she took it with the faintest knowing smirk. You look like you planned this, she murmured, under her breath. He didn't glance at her, but his lips curved just enough to betray the truth. Maybe I did. From across the room, Olivia froze mid-laugh, her hand tightening around her fiancé's arm. The faintest shadow crossed her perfectly painted face as she took in the sight of Thomas, perfectly at ease, and the mysterious woman at his side who seemed to have captured the attention of everyone else in the room without even trying. Lana felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her, but she didn't flinch. If anything, her spine straightened just a little more, her gaze sweeping. over the crowd as if this was all part of a story she had already decided how to end. Thomas offered her his arm. She took it with a slight, knowing smirk. "You look like you planned this," she murmured. "I did," he replied, under his breath. Near the center of the room, Olivia stood, encircled by designer-clad guests and a halo of champagne flutes. The stir of attention rippled toward her, and when she turned, her eyes locked on them. For the briefest second, her perfect smile faltered, before it slid back into place like glass over steel. "Thomas," she greeted, her voice honeyed but edged. Her gaze swept over Lana, slow and deliberate, the kind of look meant to measure and diminish. "You found someone interesting." Lana offered a polite nod, her composure unshaken. Olivia's voice dipped, sweet silk hiding sharpened edges. "Tell me, did you find her outside a subway station? Or does she just dress up nicely for special occasions?" Thomas's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Lana laid a light hand on his armor-silent signal. She would handle this. "I perform outside subway stations sometimes," Lana said evenly, her tone calm but laced with quiet confidence. "The acoustics are surprisingly good." Olivia blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "So, a street performer, how quaint." "If by quaint you mean unforgettable," Lana replied with a soft smile, "then yes." A flicker of amusement touched Thomas's eyes, but he said nothing. They moved away before Olivia could respond, drifting toward the quieter edges of the ballroom. "Your ex has sharp claws," Lana murmured. "She's always been a collector," Thomas replied quietly. "Of status, of people. She likes things that shine until they don't." Lana didn't answer. Instead, her gaze caught on a couple seated near the tall windows, two people whose fingers were loosely intertwined. Their laughter low, their eyes filled with decades of shared history. She approached softly. "Happy anniversary," she said, after overhearing a fragment of their conversation. 52 years today," the woman said with a warm smile. Lana's lips curved gently. She slipped a small notepad from her clutch, her fingers moving quickly, sketching in fluid strokes. Thomas, watching from a distance, stayed silent when Lana handed the drawing to the Kapala pair of weathered, yet radiant faces framed under a small arch of stars. The woman's hand flew to her mouth. Her husband's eyes shimmered as he swallowed hard. Speechless, Lana squeezed the woman's shoulder lightly before returning to Thomas. Without a word, he rose, pulled out her chair, and guided it in as she sat. For a moment, neither spoke, but in his eyes, something unguarded lingered, soft, steady, almost dangerous in its honesty. Then Olivia's voice rang out, slicing through the low hum of music. "Lana, was it?" she called sweetly. "Would you sing something for us? I mean, since you're used to performing in public, you must enjoy an audience." Thomas tensed instantly, but Lana only smiled, slow and deliberate. "Of course." Gasps whispered through the crowd as she rose, unhurried, unflustered. The pianist looked up, his brows lifting in curiosity as she approached. "Do you know Moon River?" she asked quietly. He nodded, his fingers resting on the keys. The first soft, uncertain notes drifted into the air, and then Lana began to sing, her voice rich and unshaken, pouring into every corner of the glittering room like silk and smoke. Her voice unfurled like a ribbon in the air, delicate yet rich, threaded with longing. It didn't demand attention. It drew it, quietly but irresistibly. One by one, guests turned toward her. Glasses lowered. Conversations faded into nothing. There was something in her tone that couldn't be taught, an honesty that bypassed the ears and went straight to the heart. It carried sadness wrapped in sweetness, hope stitched delicately into every note. Thomas felt it like a soft wind brushing through his chest, loosening the armor he'd worn for years. Even Olivia stood frozen, her smile stiffening, her grip tightening on her glass. When the final note faded, the room held still for one heartbeat too long, like everyone was reluctant to let it go. Then the applause came, unexpected and unrestrained, swelling until it filled the ballroom. Lana handed the mic back to the waiter, bowed just enough to be polite, and returned to Thomas's side. She kept her eyes down for a moment, almost shy. "You were unbelievable," he murmured. "I just sang," she whispered back. "No," his voice was low, certain. "You reminded them what real feels like." He didn't reach for her hand, didn't lean in too close, but the way his gaze rested on her made it clear. He wasn't pretending anymore. Outside, the city breathed under a light rain, the kind that made everything glow without soaking it too quickly. Thomas and Lana walked, side by side, their shadows stretching long under the street lamps. The post-party tension had melted into something gentler, something that felt like possibility. For a while, neither spoke. "Well," Lana said finally, looking up at the sky, "that was unexpected." Thomas gave a quiet laugh. "You mean your performance or Olivia's face during it?" "Both," she grinned, then tilted her head at him. "You okay? You've been quiet." "I was listening," he said simply, "to the way you silenced a room without ever raising your voice." The rain grew steadier. Lana ducked her head instinctively, but before she could say anything, Thomas slipped off his blazer and held it over her like an umbrella. "You'll get soaked," she said. "I'll survive," he replied with the faintest smile. "You sang. For me, least I can do." She glanced at him, surprised by the warmth in his voice. Their steps drew them closer, and the quiet that wrapped around them wasn't awkward, it was full, like a song just before the chorus. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. Are you still pretending?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes followed the curve of the sidewalk toward a row of quiet storefronts, a faint neon sign buzzing in the distance. Lana's barred dot. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost unsure. "I don't know what this is, but tonight I haven't felt this light in years, not even when I thought I was in love before." She studied him for a moment, then looked away with a small smile. "That's a good answer." They reached the worn wooden door, its peeling red paint and cracked sign reading simply, "Marlowe's. I sing here every Saturday," Lana said. "Want to come in?" He arched a brow. "You inviting me to see the real thing now?" She pushed. The door opened with a playful glint in her eye. "If you can handle it." Inside, the bar was warm and dim, a world away from the glittering ballroom. The bartender greeted Lana with a nod, and a few regulars offered smiles like old friends. The air on the balcony was cool, carrying the scent of rain from somewhere far beyond the city lights. Lana stood at the railing, arms wrapped tightly around herself, her silhouette outlined by the glow of skyscrapers. She didn't turn when Thomas stepped out, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her breath came in slow, measured waves. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. She kept her eyes fixed on the skyline. "For what?" "For bringing you into a room full of people who measure worth by last names and bank accounts." His voice was low, almost hesitant. "For letting them make you feel small." Her jaw tightened. "They didn't make me feel small," Thomas. They just reminded me I'm not them. She gave a humorless laugh. And I don't want to be. He took a step closer, his hand brushing the cold railing. That's exactly why I wanted you here. She glanced at him then, her eyes catching the light frustration, hurt, and something softer flickering underneath. Why? So I could be some kind of statement. Proof you don't need their approval. His gaze didn't waver. Because you're the only person I've met in a long time who's real, who doesn't try to be what everyone else wants. For a long moment, they just stood there, the city humming below them. Then Lana looked away again, blinking hard. It's exhausting, she admitted softly, smiling at people who've already decided you don't matter. He hesitated before speaking, his voice rougher now. You matter to me. The words hung between them, unpolished, uncalculated, so unlike him. Lana's lips parted slightly, but no reply came. She just looked at him for a heartbeat longer before turning back toward the glittering skyline. You have no idea how dangerous it is for me to believe that, she said, almost under her breath. Thomas didn't push. Instead, he shrugged off his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. She didn't resist. They stood in silence, the din of the party muffled behind the glass doors, until a faint smile ghosted across her lips. I liked you better at the dive bar, she murmured. Thomas smirked faintly. Then maybe that's where we should be right now. Thomas's voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent in it, like steel beneath velvet. She's not a risk, he said. Eleanor's gaze sharpened. She's a distraction. And in your position, distractions cost more than you can afford. To lose, he turned fully to face her now, his hands sliding into his pockets, a quiet defense. You talk like she's some passing phase. She's the most honest thing I've had in my life in years. Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. Honesty doesn't pay for skyscrapers, Thomas. It doesn't keep shareholders from pulling out when they think you've lost focus. I've seen men like you fall because they let their hearts wander. He studied her in silence for a beat, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. And maybe that's exactly the problem, he murmured. I've spent too long keeping my heart locked away just so the rest of the world thinks I'm untouchable. She hesitated then, the faintest flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. And what happens, she asked softly, when she leaves? When she realizes she can't breathe in your world? Thomas's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. Then I'll know I gave her a place in it anyway. I'd rather take that chance than go back to feeling nothing at all. Eleanor's silence was telling. She picked up the reports she'd set down, but her eyes lingered on him for a moment longer, searching, maybe even worried. Then she turned and walked out. The click of the door closing, leaving the office heavier than before. Thomas exhaled slowly, his reflection staring back at him in the glass. Somewhere in the distance, beyond the towers of glass and steel, he imagined Lana's voice, carrying into the night and polished, unfiltered, entirely hers. And for the first time in years, he knew exactly what and who was worth risking everything for. The music caught him first, low bluesy, threaded with something raw enough to stop a man mid-step. He followed the sound through the crowd, weaving past food stalls and laughing children until he saw her. Lana. She sat on a simple wooden stool, guitar balanced on her knee, head tilted toward the mic. No gown, no stage lights, just jeans, worn boots, and that same leather bracelet, frayed but unbreakable. Her hair fell loose around her face, and though she was singing for 100 strangers, every note felt like it was meant for him. Thomas didn't move closer at first. He stood at the back, hands in his pockets, feeling each word like it was carving something open inside him. When the song ended, the crowd applauded, tossing bills into the open guitar case. Lana thanked them softly and reached for a water bottle. That's when she saw him. Her fingers froze on the cap. He stepped forward slowly, careful, like she was a wild thing that might bolt. "Lana," he said, low enough for only her to hear. She looked at him rarely looked, and the silence between them was louder than the music. Then she glanced away. "You shouldn't be here." "I couldn't be anywhere else," he said, "not without you." Her jaw tightened, and she adjusted her guitar strap like she was ready to pack up. "Your world doesn't have space for me. Remember, that's not true." His voice was firmer now. "I let someone else say it, but it's not my truth. My world without you is empty, and I'm done letting other people decide who belongs in it." Lana's gaze flickered, uncertainty breaking through the wall in her eyes. "I came to tell you," he continued. "I don't care where you sing. I don't care if my name never means anything to you. I just care if you'll let me stay and listen." The crowd had already moved on to another booth, leaving the two of them in their own little island of quiet under the string lights. Finally, Lana sighed, setting the guitar back in her lap. "One song," she said, almost a challenge. Thomas smiled, small, real, the kind she'd first seen in his kitchen. "One's all I need." And as she began to play, he stepped closer until he was standing just in front of her, not caring who saw, not caring about the whispers. Because, for the first time, it wasn't about pretending anymore. A voice, soft at first, raw, achingly familiar, poured into the air like honey catching sunlight. It was the kind of sound that could make a stranger stop mid-step and forget where they were. Thomas froze. It was her. Lana stood on a small wooden platform beneath a string of faded lights. Her hair swept to one side, eyes closed as she sang. No stage glamour. Just a simple blue dress, the old leather bracelet on her wrist catching the afternoon glow. A lone guitarist played beside her, but it was her voice that carried all the weight, mournful yet threaded with hope. A song about finding light in someone's shadow. The crowd around him was still, mesmerized. But Thomas only saw her. He moved forward, step by deliberate step, until he was close enough to see the way her breath trembled against the microphone. Lana's eyes opened and caught his. Her voice wavered for just a moment, but she didn't stop singing. When the final note faded, the silence was heavy, expectant. Thomas's voice broke through it, steady and clear enough for everyone to hear. "I told you once to help me pretend to fool a room full of people into thinking we were in love. But the truth is, the only person I fooled was myself." Lana's fingers tightened around the mic. "I thought I was just hiring someone for a night," he continued, "but you made me laugh. You made me see the world differently. You made me feel like a version of myself I didn't think existed anymore." He paused, his chest rising unevenly. "And then I let other people tell me you weren't enough. The truth is, Lana, I was afraid you'd realize I wasn't enough for you." A soft gasp rippled through the crowd. Thomas took another step toward the stage, his voice lowering but carrying even more weight. "I don't want to pretend anymore. I don't care about parties or expectations. I only care about what I feel when you sing, what I feel when I look at you. It's real. It's the only thing that's ever been real." Lana set the microphone gently on the stool beside her. A tear slipped down her cheek. Slowly, she stepped off the stage. One step, then another, until she was close enough to fall into his arms. The crowd erupted in applause, but neither of them heard it. They held each other too tightly, clinging like they were afraid to let go. Thomas's voice was low, almost breaking. "I'm sorry it took me so long." She looked up at him, her words soft but certain. "I was just waiting for the truth." And there, in the middle of a city street, surrounded by strangers, music, and light, they found their way back. Not through grand gestures, not through perfect lines, but through the thing that had always connected them, her voice and his. Choice to finally listen. Time passed, and the rhythm of the neighborhood began to change. Where sirens once echoed, laughter now drifted. Where silence settled before music spilled from open windows. At the heart of it all was a small converted warehouse with a hand-painted sign, Lana's Music Corner. Inside, children sat cross-legged with ukuleles too big for their arms. Some tapping hand drums, others humming shyly as Lana guided them through melodies. Her voice here was softer, not performing but teaching-giving. Lessons were free. No child was ever turned away. What few knew was that every instrument, every sheet of music, every single light bulb was quietly paid for by Thomas. He never put his name on a donation. That was the way he wanted it. Their home was nothing grand, just a modest apartment near the park. 2 rooms, a little balcony, a kitchen where they still cooked together, spilling salt and laughing over burnt toast. And on quiet nights, when the city outside seemed far away, Lana would hum under her breath, and Thomas would stop whatever he was doing just to listen, because now he knew some things were never meant to be pretend. Lana was still trying to flip pancakes too early. Thomas was still cleaning up without a word. Every evening she sang while he sat beside her, pen in hand, notebook open, scribbling lyrics he never believed he had in him. They called it evening rehearsal. Most nights ended in laughter, burnt edges, and unfinished songs. But one night was different. The community had gathered in the park for a small concert. No suits, no spotlights, just neighbors on blankets and string lights swaying in the wind. Thomas sat in the middle row, no name tag, no title, just jeans, sneakers, and a folded program in his lap. When Lana stepped onto the small wooden stage, guitar in hand, that old leather bracelet still on her wrist, every part of him leaned forward. She scanned the crowd and found him instantly. For a moment, the rest of the world disappeared. She strummed the first chord. It was a song they had written together, not about heartbreak, not about longing, but about stillness, about finding a place to land after years of wandering. Her voice drifted over the park like a lullaby for the weary. Conversations faded. Children curled up against their parents. Couples laced their fingers together. But Thomas only watched her. She wasn't pretending anymore. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She was home. When the final note faded, the applause rose like a wave, but Thomas didn't move. His eyes glistened, his smile quiet but certain. This wasn't just a concert, it was a moment. And for the first time, he wasn't on the outside looking in. He belonged here. He belonged to her. He leaned back, heart full, whispering to himself, "She was once the voice that made me stop. Now she's the reason I want to stay forever." Children from her music class gathered around, their laughter like tiny bells in the twilight. The lanterns swayed overhead. Lana waved to the crowd, her smile bright in the warm glow. Thomas's heart felt full, not in the restless way success once filled it, but in the steady, anchoring way love does when it's real. This wasn't a happy ending. It was a new beginning, a life stitched together not by status or spectacle, but by choice, by music, by moments only they had to understand. And as she stepped down from the stage, he knew she had once been the voice that made him stop in his tracks. Now, she was the reason he would never walk away again.